I love Big Mama Flora. She was round and soft and always gave me a big hug in the morning. She was one of the only ones who ever showed me kindness when I was little. My mother died when I was too young to remember her face. Big Mama told me that my mother, whose name was Salma, had a boyfriend over at the Williams plantation, but she would never tell anybody who he was because she didn't want him getting into trouble for sneaking out to see her in the big house at night. Flora also told me that that man nobody knew was my father. She didn't even tell you his name, Big Mama? I asked when she would tell me the sad story of Salma Turner when I was still too little to have to work in the cotton fields. No, baby Sal, Big Mama said. Master Tobias would have given a Christmas ham to the nigger told who had fathered his wife's favorite maid's baby. He'd walk through the slave quarters at night, saying that he would give the man who looked like Salma's baby to Mr. Stewart for punishment. So, if some slave knew who it was that your mama was seeing, he would have done himself a big favor by telling Master Tobias his name. And once that Tobias knowed who that slave was, he was sure to end up in Mr. Stewart's shack. Tobias Turner was Master's name, and Mr. Stewart was his overseer. The overseer made sure that all the slaves worked hard and didn't cause any ruckus or break the rules. The rules were that you did as you were told, didn't talk back, never complained, and stayed in your place. Mr. Stewart had a shack that stood out in the middle of a stand of live oaks behind the slave quarters, and if you were ever unlucky enough to get sent back there, then you were in serious trouble. Many slaves never returned from Mr. Stewart's killing shack, and those that did come back were never the same. I hadn't seen Mr. Stewart's torture chamber at that time, but I knew about it because I had heard stories from those few souls that survived his torments. They said that he had a pine table that was twice as long as a tall man is tall, and there were leather straps on both ends that he would tie to a slave's wrists and ankles. The straps were attached to baskets filled with heavy stones that would stretch a poor soul's legs and arms out so far from their sockets that afterward that slave could hardly even lift his feet off the ground to walk, and he would have to use both of his hands just to get the food to his mouth to eat. Yes, sir, Big Ma Flora would say in the backyard under the big magnolia tree that Una Turner's great-grandfather planted when he settled the land back before any living slave, even Mud Albert, could remember. Yes, indeed. If Master Tobias knowed who your father was, that man wouldn't have stood a nigger's chance on the main road at midday. I was broken-hearted when Big Mama would tell the story about my mother and her sad end. When Salma died giving birth to me, Una Turner told Master Tobias that I was to remain on her family's plantation for as long as I lived as a remembrance to my mother. Una loved my mother because of her voice. It was said that Salma Turner had the most beautiful voice that anyone on Corinthian plantation had ever heard. Miss Una had a weak constitution and bad nerves, and when she would have an attack, it was only my mother's singing that would keep her from despair. Miss Una loved my mother so much, Big Ma Flora said, that she would have been sure to keep me up in the big house with her if she had lived. But a year after my mother died, Miss Una had one of her attacks, and, without Salma's singing, she succumbed to the malady and passed over to the upper level and back to the place that all life comes from. Sometime after Miss Una died, Master Tobias named me 47 and told Big Mama that when I was big enough, I was meant to live out in the slave quarters and work in the cotton fields with all the other slaves. Master Tobias didn't like me because he blamed my mother for getting pregnant and stealing herself from his property by dying. But he didn't want to sell me off because it was Miss Una's dying wish to keep me on her plantation near my mother's grave. Until I grew, Master Tobias made me live in the barn, feeding and grooming the horses and running any errands that the house slaves had for me. I made myself pretty scarce out there, because whenever Master saw me, he'd remember my mother, and then he'd get mad and look to see if I'd done something wrong. And if there was one straw out of place, he would tell Big Mama Flora to get a razor strap and whip my backside. Big Mama didn't want to beat me, but she did anyway, because Tobias was watching. After these beatings, when Master was gone, Big Mama would fold me in her arms and apologize. "I'm sorry, baby child, but if I didn't make you cry, he would have took the strap," she'd say, "and whip you hard enough to draw blood." "Why he hate me so much, Big Mama?" I'd whine. "He blame you for his wife dying," she'd say. "He just hurt so much inside, and you the only one left alive that he could blame." "But I didn't do nothing." "Shh, baby. You just stay out of Tobias's way. Don't look up when he's around, and always do all your work and more than that, so you don't give him no reason to have me beat you." We both knew that when I got big enough to work in the fields, that he'd give me over to Mr. Stewart when he got mad, and Mr. Stewart would use a bullwhip on my bare back. He might even stretch my bones until I was dead. We both knew that I was safe from Mr. Stewart until I grew big enough to pick cotton. So Mama Flora didn't feed me meat or milk so that I'd stay small and not have to go to work in the cotton fields. I wasn't allowed in the big house. The only times I was ever there was when Big Mama sneaked me in so I could see how grand the white people's lives were. So I lived in the barn my whole life until just before Tall John came to the plantation. In that time, Big Ma Flora made my acquaintance with Mud Albert and Champ Nolan. Mud Albert was the oldest slave on the plantation, and Champ was the strongest. Champ once carried a full-grown mule across the yard in front of the mansion. Albert and Champ loved Big Mama, and so they told her that they would take me under their wings when I had to go out in the slave quarters and live with the rough element out there. I spent most of my time working hard and avoiding Master's angry attention. But it wasn't all hard work and beatings. The barn was very large, and it had a little window at the very top for ventilation. When nobody was looking, I used to climb up to that window and pretend that I was in the crow's nest of some great ship coming from Europe or Africa. I'd heard about these ships from some of the slaves that had been brought in chains from across the seas, and from some of the house slaves who had seen pictures of the great three-mast sailboats and books from Master's library. I'd sit up there at the end of the day watching while the slaves picked cotton in the fields, pretending I was the lookout, put up there to tell the captain when there was some island paradise where we could drop our anchor. And sometimes, if I was very lucky, I would catch a glimpse of Miss Eloise, Tobias's daughter. Eloise. She was dainty and white as a china plate. Her pale red hair and green eyes were startling. In my mind, she was the most beautiful creature in all of Georgia. When Eloise would come out to play, I'd squeeze down behind the sill of the open window and watch. Even when she was alone, she laughed while she played, swinging on a swing chair or eating sweets on the veranda. Every time I saw her in the yard behind the master's mansion, I got a funny feeling all over. I wanted to go down there and be happy with her, but I knew that a nigger like me wasn't allowed even to look at someone like Miss Eloise. That was back before I met Tall John, and he taught me about the word nigger, and how wrong it was for me to use such a term. One day, when Eloise was sitting on her swing chair alone, I stuck my head out to see what she was doing. But I didn't realize that the sun was on my back, and that it cast the shadow of my head down into Miss Eloise's lap. She looked up, squinting at the sun, and said, "Who's up there?" I dug down on